morning and welcome to the Blue Earth County Board of Commissioners meeting of June 21st, 2022. So all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have the agenda review.
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda today.
Move to approve. And moved by Vance. And,
Second.
There can't be no guessing here. There's only 3 here for now. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. And now then we have a planning and zoning, our public hearings. And welcome up here, John. And I'll just say the first item on the agenda is planning and zoning. And planning and zoning staff are here to present their action items. And this is a public hearing, so public comment will be allowed in just a moment. I'd ask the planning and zoning staff to please introduce themselves and for the record and introduce the item before the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. John Considine, Senior Land Use Planner. PC 1622 is a request for review and approval from Blue Earth County for an amendment to the Blue Earth County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 24, Zoning. The amendment includes the addition of cemeteries as a conditional use in the Conservation District and creates performance standards for cemeteries. At the Planning Commission, staff presented the report. Members of the Sterling Cemetery Board addressed the Planning Commission. They thanked staff for the research and report and the Planning Commission for considering the amendment. They asked if the standards of the proposed amendment would apply to existing cemeteries, and planning staff responded, stating that the proposed standards would only apply to expansion proposals. There was no further public comment. Members of the Planning Commission indicated they had no questions or concerns and stated it is a good amendment. Following the discussion, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation for approval of the amendment to the County Board based on the findings prepared by staff. The board action, adoption of the ordinance amendment based on findings recommended by the Planning Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Okay, at this point, we'll open for public comment on PC number 16-22. This hearing is being recorded, so please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anybody for public comment? Okay, again, any wishing to comment on PC 16-22 for comment? And last time record any comment on 16-22. If not, we'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the board.
I would move the ordinance amendment based on the findings recommended by the Planning Commission.
I'll second.
Second by Vance. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, carries. Thank you. Good, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PC 1722 is a request for review and approval from Blue Earth County of an amendment to the Blue Earth County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 20, Land Division. The amendment includes allowance of non-conforming property seeking to modify property boundaries, which improves the property's suitability for development, but still does not meet the standards of buildability. At the Planning Commission, staff presented the report, and there was no public comment. Members of the Planning Commission indicated they had no questions or concerns and stated it is a good amendment. Following the discussion, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation for approval of the amendment to the County Board based on the findings prepared by staff. And the board action is adoption of the ordinance amendment based on findings recommended by the Planning Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Okay, at this time, we'll open it for public comment on PC number 17-22. And this hearing is being recorded, so please state your name and address to the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And anybody wishing to comment on PC 17-22? Again, if anybody wishes to comment on PC-1722. If not, we will close the public comment portion and bring it back to the board for discussion.
I'll move approval of adoption of the ordinance amendment based on the findings recommended by the Planning Commission.
I will second that.
And seconded by Vance. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
what's it?
I just have a comment to make. We did have some discussion on this item. And we did think that that would make a very good fit to what we're trying to do, because it is people trying to improve their property, but it still doesn't meet the requirements. So it just made a lot of sense, and we all thought that was a great idea that the staff brought this forward.
Appreciate that. All right. Thank you. Anybody other comments? All right, we're back to the board for action, for vote. And I guess we already had it. We had moved in second?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. All right.
Thank
Thank you, John. Have a good day.
Good
You
work.
too. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Next, we have our preliminary hearing on the establishment of improvement, judicial district number 33. And Craig?
Morning, Craig.
Morning, Craig.
Good morning. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I guess we should have a hearing today is on a preliminary hearing on the proposed improvement judicial district 33, and the purpose of the hearing is to consider a petition for the drainage project with all matters pertaining to the preliminary survey report. And so now we'll have the drainage staff go over the jurisdictional documents.
Okay.
You might want to introduce yourself again, Craig.
Okay. Craig Austinson, Drainage Management Coordinator. As far as jurisdictional documents, the hearing notice was mailed to landowners on June 9th, 2022. The hearing notice was also published in Mankato Free Press on June 9th, 2022. We do have a response from the DNR, which I will read into the record. A second. From the Department of Natural Resources, dated May 31st, 2022, addressed to myself, Blue Earth County Drainage Authority, Craig Austinson, Drainage Management Coordinator, regarding the preliminary engineer's report for proposed improvement of Blue Earth Judicial Ditch 33, Blue Earth County Drainage Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to review the proposed improvement of Blue Earth Judicial Ditch 33. We offer a summary and context of the project and comments following the Minnesota Statute 103E.255 on behalf of the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Project summary. This project proposes to enhance the tile network in a 1,210 acre JD33 watershed by adding more extensive, steeper and deeper tile network. If it were repaired fully in a functional state, the existing system offers a 0.19 inch per day drainage coefficient at the outlet. The proposed system would provide 0.51 inches per day drainage coefficient at the outlet. The project's estimated cost is approximately $345,000 to the landowners and $102,000 to the road authority. Context. The project outlets into a floodplain wetland directly adjacent to the Le Sueur River. The Le Sueur River watershed is one of the most erosive and sediment and nutrient-laden watersheds in the state of Minnesota. The receiving Le Sueur River reach impaired for sediment, mainly driven by altered hydrology, which causes excessive stream bank erosion. Just down from this reach, sediment smothers habitat and several other stressors, has impaired aquatic life. Altered hydrology has occurred from drainage, land use, and evapotranspiration changes that is further exacerbated by climatic changes and increased precipitation. We are concerned that this project will increase the total flow volume, peak flows, alter flow timing, further contribute to the altered hydrology and the numerous pollutants and stressors already impairing the Le Sueur River. Conservation land. The majority of this project is located within a Bowser Rim conservation easement on privately owned land, which appears to contain restored native grasslands, wetlands, and woodlands, all of which have provided habitat and otherwise highly altered landscape. The project will cause substantial impacts to this land, including proposed trenching depths of 30 feet, which will require significant evacuation in areas of impacts. Are there any alternate routes, locations that the project could consider to avoid impacts on the rim easement? Alternately, could the project bore the tile under the rim easement to avoid surface impacts? According to the easement agreement, the landowner is responsible for restoring the land to the condition described in the conservation plan. Suppose the project is pursued as proposed through the surface of the conservation easement. In that case, the project would assume responsibility for the restoration of the CREP land and should include the cost in the project costs. This area of impact within the conservation easement should be specifically identified, and the restoration plan should be developed to determine how the project will restore the 0.15 acre woodland, acres of grassland, wetland soils, and habitat that would be impacted by the project. Wetlands. This drainage watershed has historically dominated by a few hundred-acre wetland. The remnant of this wetland is easily visible in the topography, soils, and wet spots reported in the engineer's report. This area is still maintaining limited wetland function. The subsoil and surface storage that remains in the historic wetland would be decreased, and the proposed drainage improvements as a result flows at the project outlet would be substantially increased. Instead of working to eliminate these farmed wetlands and storage they provide, we urge that the project proposers consider wetland restorations. The project also runs through the National Wetland Inventory wetlands within the CREP land and discharges into a National Wetland Inventory wetland. The increase in peak and total discharge at the outlet will likely impact the wetland at the outlet. Trenching through the smaller NWI wetlands within the CREP property could cause long-term degradation if not carefully planned and implemented. The project may also alter the hydrology of these wetlands by removing surface flow and changing the hydrology of the watershed and its baselines. The project needs to work with the WACA, Wetland Conservation Act, Technical Evaluation Panel Authority, and append appropriate documents to the engineering report. Fish and wildlife. A cursory screening of the Minnesota Natural Heritage Database shows that state endangered animals have been observed near the project area, and sensitive aquatic species are present downstream. The project needs to submit a National Heritage Review request. Please append the National Heritage in the NHIS review results to the engineering report and incorporate any mitigations to the engineering report to document how the project will avoid listed species take. In addition to potential impacts on the listed species, the impacts on crepland, wetlands, and Le Sueur River are likely to be negatively impacted fish and wildlife more broadly. Excuse me. Hydraulics, public waters, and modeling. We appreciate the work that has been done into modeling the proposed project's effects. To assess the impact on public waters and the potential need for the public waters work permits, we need more information. Because XP Swim is approved by FEMA and floodplain modeling analysis, and OICM is not, the DNR is not, has not adopted ICM, the model used for the engineers model to model this system. So we would need more detailed documentation, as we cannot view model results ourselves. Please address this and document the following in the engineer's report. The reported modeling shows that the improved system compared to the fully functioning existing system would substantially increase the peak flows through the tile, i.e. 2.5 times higher peak than the 5-year storm, for the 5-year storm event, from 38 to 87 cubic feet per second. The reported modeling indicates that the large amount of flow is traveling via surface runoff. The Example, the 5-year storm event delivers a peak surface flow rate of 45 cubic feet per second. The engineer's report finds that due to the large overland flow, the change in the total peak flow is limited, 11% for the 5-year storm. We have questions about the validity of the high surface flow and hence limited flow at the outlet. If the landscape were experiencing high surface flow due to frequent runoff events, we would expect to see flow paths carved out of the landscape. However, the aerial imagery does not indicate significant flow paths traveling to the outlet. Because there is no good evidence that there's a high amount of surface flow is occurring, we are concerned that the amount of storage currently in the watershed is underestimated by the model. In other words, the model may not be routing water out of the watershed via the surface runoff. The water is likely sitting in the landscape, in soils, and depressional areas. If this is the case, then the change in peak flow leaving the system would essentially be from the peak flow changes in the tile system. The total volume of the peak flow leaving the watershed would be substantially increased by the proposed project. Please review the modeling and to ensure that the modeling system represents an actual conditions of the best possible ability, including comments about finding the model changes to address these concerns. Please also address below the points of the engineer's report that help clarify the potential impact on public waters. And there's several bullet points. First one, what is the engineer's estimate of the existing system current functioning drainage coefficient capacity in its disrepair state? What is the drainage coefficients for upstream branches? Please include a table of the engineer's report. Identify what will become of the existing tile. If the current tile remains in place and provides a functional outlet, then the tile needs to be included in the proposed condition modeling. We note that the presented modeling shows 1, the fully functioning ACSIC state, and 2, the proposed improved system. Therefore, the actual disrepair existing conditions are not represented. We request that the existing disrepair systems is modeled. In other words, 3 scenarios should be provided for comparison. 1, the existing system in its existing functional state. 2, the repaired ACSIC system. And 3, the proposed improved system. Report results for one and 2 year storm events. And smaller flows substantially affect streams. Include a hydrograph and tables for all modeling storm events and for all scenarios that identifies the total flow and peak flow. Include the surface runoff, subsurface drainage, and total runoff volume in the tables. If possible, illustrate that the hydrograph portion delivered via surface flow and the system is separately. A map illustrating the modeled system. Maps of modeled standing water in the watershed. Details of any changes in the modeling behavior model between the existing and repaired and proposed improved systems. References for what the sources were used for input parameters to the model, particularly the non-standard inputs. Describe how private tile is or is not incorporated into the model. Describe how the historic wetlands is modeled. Do the modeled soils reflect the wetland soils? Please detail any work necessary for the outlet. For instance, is riprap planned? How will the project prevent excessive scour at the outlet? Separable maintenance. Minnesota Statute 103.215 subdivision 6 allows for what is referred to as separable maintenance. This means that the cost of the system's components needing repair can be deducted from the total cost when assuming if the benefits outweigh the cost, which is required by Minnesota Statute 103.341 subdivision 1. Separable maintenance also affects how the cost is divided among landowners. All properties being benefited from the system are charged for the separable maintenance portion of the improvement. Only the cost above and the separable maintenance cost is charged to the properties that benefit from the improvement. This is an essential consideration for both the drainage authority and the landowners in the system. The engineer reports documents existing ponding areas within the watershed and identifying the project necessity to improve the drainage capacity of Judicial District 33 to meet the drainage standards for current farming practices. The report discusses previous improvements to the systems in the 80s and 90s, but the age of the existing tile in this repair is unclear. 3 pictures, captions, note problem areas. If it's unclear if the entire section is degraded, or if the repair is just a couple of locations, would restore functionality to this stretch. The engineer should also provide more detail about age, consideration, cause of the degradation throughout the improved system. The report should also estimate the existing system functional capacity. Also, the ACSIC is noted as 0.19 at the outlet. What is the outlet estimated to function at its degraded state? Also, identify the existing tile, if the existing tile is being repaired or otherwise maintained. The plan notes to protect some existing system components. Alternative measures of compatibility with local plans. The Le Sueur watershed is already highly stressed by altered hydrology. The Le Sueur River RAPS report details several practices to help restore the protected waters in the watershed. One key strategy is to mitigate hydrologic changes due to the drainage system improvements. Unless this project mitigates changes to the hydrology, it is not consistent with the RAPS report, while the engineering report mentions that other BMPs can be adopted by individual landowners, the drainage authority should work with the project to mitigate impacts to hydrology by adopting sufficient BMPs. In the watershed already is so stressed and polluted, and the practices that mitigate improvement impacts should be adopted to be consistent with the environmental considerations within the Minnesota Statute 103E.015. The drainage manual recently underwent a substantial revision in which the extensive amount of information of the BMPs was added. The drainage manual states other BMPs are located off the Minnesota Statute 103 drainage system and consequently not within the traditional purview of the drainage system. However, because of their efforts related to Minnesota Statute 103E.015, a drainage authority may find that there are practices that can be applied on fields and farms in the watershed of the system which will provide significant benefits downslope to the drainage system. Typical structural off-system BMPs might include water sediment control basins, grass waterways, and drainage water management, to name a few. Typical non-structural off-system BMPs would be nutrient management, cover crops, conservation tillage, and are applied on lands within the watershed of the system. It is important for both the drainage inspector and the drainage system engineer to become aware of the potential for off-system BMPs to solve on-stream problems. Soil health practices, cover crops, conservation tillages, crop rotation, etc. improve the soil, increase the water holding capacity, infiltration, evapotranspiration, as well as improve the soil structure and strength. Producers have documented how these practices can help reduce water problems and improve field conditions. These practices could help with the current conditions and help mitigate the hydraulic impacts of the drainage system repair or improvements. Conclusion. The drainage statute requires the drainage authority to ensure several criteria are met or a project must be dismissed. Minnesota Statutes 103E.261 subdivision 4 and 103E.341 subdivision 1 states that the project must be dismissed if the adverse environmental impact is greater than the public benefit or utility considering the environmental land use. and multiple water management criteria in section 103E.015 subdivision 1. And the engineer has not reported a plan to make the proposed drainage project feasible and acceptable. The proposed drainage project is not practicable after considering the environmental, land use, and multipurpose water management criteria in section 103E.015 subdivision 1. Several aspects of this project require closer inspection and adherence to the drainage statute. The Drainage Authority should resolve these and the following issues before moving forward. Avoidance of or restoration plan for the rim conservation easement. Impact on wetlands and wetland conservation technical evaluation panel engagement. NHIS review and mitigation for potential listed species impacts. Additional modeling and related to documentation to evaluate impacts of public water. Documents separable maintenance is appropriately applied. Mitigation and additional practice adoption to be consistent with local plans. We encourage the Drainage Authority and the project proposers to implement projects and management practices that will work to mitigate altered hydrology and water quality impacts within the watershed. Soil health and practices other than BMPs could be used to store evapotranspiration in the landscape while also supporting sustainable farm land and healthy watersheds. Cover crops and residue management could increase soil organic matter and soil water and nutrient holding capacity. These are practices that are detailed in Chapter 5 of the Minnesota Public Drainage Manual. Restoring drainage in farmed wetlands would add storage, evapotranspiration, habitat within these areas. All of these practices would help mitigate heavy rains and help store, infiltrate, and evapotranspirate water. Please send the response to this letter as well as the meeting minutes, finding of fact, viewers report, and any order issued by the Drainage Authority regarding the proposed improvements of the DNR when they become available. Please submit these reports to Region 4 Drainage DNR at the stateofminnesota.us. And it is signed by Todd Colander, DNR Southern Region EWR North District Manager. That's it for jurisdiction documents. We did receive a letter from David Mingy that we would normally maybe summarize and actually read, but Mr. Mingy is here, so he will be able to speak during the comment portion of the meeting. So that's it for jurisdictional documents.
Okay, thank you, Craig. At this time, then we'll hear from the engineer.
Morning, Chuck.
Good morning.
Good morning.
State your names, I guess.
Yeah, Chuck Brandel with ISG. You guys see the screen? Let me hit play here for a second. Introducing Jacob Mueller. He's been full-time with us for a year, and then he was an intern before that. This is his first project that's made it to a hearing, so.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Good luck.
Yep. So. There we go. Okay, see that? So for again, Chuck Brandel and Jacob Mueller. For JD 33, this is the preliminary engineer's report. It's the mid-step in the process. This is not the final approval. Some of the main goals are, is the project feasible? Is the outlet adequate? Addressing some of the modeling concerns in the preliminary design. So we'll give a overview of our report, and then I do have some bullet points to respond to the DNR letter also. The watershed itself is 1,200 acres. It's fairly flat, 81 feet of fall in the watershed, predominantly clay soils, predominantly agricultural row crops. The system was established in 1919, so it's a little over 100 years old. 16,000 feet of buried tile. There have been a few repairs and improvements. In 1980, branch 5, 6, and 8 in the main line were extended, realigned, and then there was a pump station that was actually added to the system. In 1993, the pump station was removed and there was an additional main line added in the middle of the system. So there's been improvements in the middle of the system. The goal of this improvement is the outlet. The outlet has not been improved and is actually a pinch point and has almost failed. So that's the goal of this improvement, is only to work on the outlet portion. Here is a watershed map of the system, and it's somewhat unique in the standpoint of when you look at the elevations, the proposed improvement is only on this downstream end, and the tile runs through a low area and then an area that was described in the DNR letter that is in CREP, and then there's a large hill, and the tile runs through that large hill. So it's a barrier for overland flow. The overland flow actually comes out to the east in a different location than where the tile outlets. So they ran a shorter route through a hill, through a lower area for when they constructed this tile. I'll let Jacob kind of go over the existing system
For sure.
briefly.
As we can see towards the, at the outlet, we're outletting currently at a 26-inch tile. That is the original 1919 tile. Following that up, once you get out of the CREP land, across that private driveway, we downsized to an 18-inch at a much steeper slope, coming up that hill that Chuck described, and then flattening back out to a 24 and a 26-inch tile. The 26 being the original 1919 tile to the east, and then that newer main line that was built in 1993, which is a 24-inch.
So we have a 24, a 26, and then a private 15-inch line coming into an 18-inch line. So the proposal is to fix that location where all three of those larger tiles come into the smaller tile.
Yep.
The remaining system is not being proposed to be improved at this point, just this last portion of the outlet. We did have meetings with landowners. We did look at options to do multiple branches, to look at the whole system, and they decided that the issue on this system is that we've got three lines coming into one spot, and that's the problem spot.
So we've discussed this a little bit, but in this map it's a bit easier to see. The orange tile in this case is the original tile. You can see that how that main line comes through to the east of that pink line, which is that 1993 main line, and they meet at that little point which is noted with that orange dot. That was the pump station that was placed in 1980 and then removed in 1993. So that auxiliary main line goes below that to pick up those branches upstream. And then the blue lines upstream were the 1980 improvement for branch 5 and 6. So that was a change in alignment, altered slopes and sizes at that time.
So kind of in summary, this portion of the system has been improved and a secondary outlet has been added, but it never got all the way to the outlet.
So what we can see from our existing capacities is the majority of the system is below what we would consider standard drainage values, being ½ an inch per day. And that's especially noted at the outlet where we're seeing significantly lower, as the kind of the three areas in question are the top three, which are about, ranging from 40 to 60% of what we want to see there to be adequate. That tile as well was televised in November of 2021. A variety, you can see in the bottom right image where that tile bumps down to an 18-inch and is almost totally full. So
it's had an almost complete failure at that location. So we've got a tile that's undersized and is failing. So again, part of the goal of the televising was to look at the condition of portions of the system to identify if we needed to do more than just the outlet. At that time, it was identified that we have our major problem is the capacity and the condition of the outlet. So from a separable maintenance standpoint, You don't have to accept separable maintenance at the preliminary stage, but it was brought up in the DNR's letter. The system is out of repair. I mean, you can see by this picture, we couldn't get the camera through because there's something blocking the flow. We did do a drone flight, and then showed this to landowners. We kind of won't go over that. From the proposed design, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, for sure. What we're looking at here is to replace those 3 sections of tile and connect both the 1993 improved main line as well as the existing, and replace that entire original existing main line outlet. That'll start at the outlet with a 36-inch tile and neck down to a 30-inch once we cross that private drive, and then following up, and it'll finish out at a 30-inch and connect those 26 and 24-inch tiles.
We do have to bore across County Road 172. I have reached out to Blue Earth County Public Works, did get the original plans, asked them for if they were doing any improvements at this time. They are not. So we will have to bore the tile at that location. It is fairly deep to bore through, but so that makes sense both from the depth and that it's a paved road. Yeah, go ahead.
With this proposed improvement, we'd hit that ½ inch per day drainage coefficient and provide an adequate outlet for all those upstream branches and remove that bottleneck that's currently being seen in that failing tile, the downstream extents.
There was a comment about, or many comments about the CREP property. There is a CREP easement at the outlet. It is currently in grassland. And included in the project cost is restoration of that area. There are currently some low basins that the tile goes through, the existing tile goes through. We're gonna offset the proposed tile to avoid disturbing those basins and go in just what I call flatter grassland, and then have a reseeding plan once the project is complete. Along with that, we'll cover, there is an outlet. If you can see where the pointer is, this is the hill. The tile does go through a hill at that location. And then there is what we call kind of a distilling pool. And we're proposing to add some riprap to that to reduce any erosion with the new tile coming through. The DNR's comments also state looking at potentially a different alignment. We have not looked at that at this point. You could follow another alignment, and we could include that as an option in the final engineer's report, but it's my understanding it would go outside of the watershed, and there's private tile issues. There is a hog barn in that area and a road, so it may be more costly to do that, but that's why we didn't consider it originally. When we looked at the outlet flow rates, we modeled both the tile and the overland flow. There was a comment in the DNR letter about using XP Swim versus ICM. It's a modeling software. It's a framework. Think of it like your Microsoft. We're kind of going from Microsoft 10 to Microsoft 12. The company that owns XP Swim is not updating XP Swim. They're switching to this program called ICM. So that's why we've switched to using that, because it's a system that can be updated. They're very similar programs. But when we look at the flows, we have a significant reduction in overland flow because the existing tile's undersized. It pops out and then it goes overland, and we'll show some pictures of that. On June 13th, there was a couple-inch rain event that occurred in the watershed, and if you can kind of follow this picture along, this is where the tile runs, kind of like this, and it overflows outside of the watershed and comes through here. There were comments about no signs of that overflow. You can see by this couple-inch rain event that it does do that. And when we look at our hydraulic model results for the same scenario, it very closely matches up. So we're pretty confident in our hydraulic modeling. It's nice to have a drone to fly right after a rain event. You could see, you know, do your results match up with what is actually happening? And I would say this is pretty good evidence of that. We did not include storage at this point because we're just redoing the outlet, but we did talk to landowners about the potential wetland restoration. I don't think they were interested at this time, but they did say maybe in the future, depending on the rest of the system, that they would consider that. We put together a project cost from using current bid prices. Tile is very high. As you know, fuel is high. We're estimating the project to be a $425,000 project. To repair the system is about $350,000. With the boring of the road, there are some anticipated road authority costs, about $74,000, which would bring the total landowner cost to approximately $359,000. Blue Earth County is very familiar with our construction practices, so I'm going to kind of skip over those. It's something we cover in the landowner meetings. This is not a very large project, so it could be bid in one bid package. We spec out HDPE or RCP, which is pretty standard. And I just got pictures of different types of connections. The DNR did have a comment on the abandonment of the existing tile. As you saw in the pictures, there's portions of it that aren't functioning. We would cut those portions off, and then we also, at the county road, would completely disconnect the existing system. At the township road, disconnect the existing system, and at property lines. So the existing system will not be functioning. Portions of it can be used as a private header. Thus, we did not include it in the model. We did go over multi-purpose drainage management practices with landowners. Gave them a copy of this map. I did add the large wetland to it. And we did discuss that at the landowner meeting. Because of how flat the system is, there are many conservation practices like controlled drainage that could be implemented. Those are private landowner decisions, but we do give consideration to those. We also looked at the CREP land could have some larger wetland enhancements. Again, it's already in a permanent easement, so we would need approval from the landowner and the state to do those, but that is something we could reach out again on. So. A couple of the DNR points, I'm just going to hit on a few of them, and if we want to dive into those more, we can. There was a comment about the existing system and its capacity. It's near failure, but it varies in capacity from location to location because of there's spots that are almost completely not functioning to some that are functioning as originally constructed. It's a standard to model those as it can be repaired, because that's your legal capacity, and I think that's a standard throughout the state that I've encountered, and that's how we've modeled projects in the past. The upstream branch capacities were in the report. They were just in the appendix, so we did throw those in the letter so they were clear. I did request on April 1st, when we sent the report, if the DNR would like to meet, we'd be happy to meet and discuss the project. I did not hear back. We do have a standing invite for a quarterly meeting on Blue Earth County projects with the DNR, and I have not gotten a response to that yet. That's about 2 years old at this point. So the existing tile will be abandoned. I covered that already. There was a comment about the 1 year and 2 year events. Those are not required by statute to be modeled, so we did not include them in the report. We can, but again, we've been directed to stick to what's required by the statute, and that's what we did for this project. We did include hydrographs, maps of where the model inputs were, some wetland characteristics, and some of the changes between the models in the response. I'm not going to go over those in detail, but I am going to request another meeting if this does get approved before the FER with DNR staff to go over our model. All private lands we assume to be system tiled. Most of them are already system tiled in this watershed. So we assumed all of the private lands are tiled at essentially a half-inch drainage coefficient, whether they are or not. Talked about riprap at the outlet. We did do an NHIS review, and there are 2 rare species that have been found near the watershed, the Blanton's turtle and the black sand shell, which is a clam. They are not in the watershed, but have been found near. The Blanton's turtle, we have worked on projects that they're near. We have to make sure that we don't use any plastics in any seeding or erosion control mat. So that is a spec that we've used. Blue Earth LeSueur JD15 had that issue, and we were able to cover that. We do have comments that with the reduction of overland flow that we should not have an impact on the black sand shell. The large wetland is being reviewed by landowners, and we will look at a TEP meeting on any wetland impacts where we don't anticipate any with the route that we've proposed. And then if you saw the map, the overland flow will be reduced. So at this point, the preliminary stage, the system's 100 years old. There's been improvements on the upper end of the system, but not the lower end. The lower end of the system is failing, somewhat probably due to the pressure that's been put on it by the other portions of the system. We feel the project's cost-effective, practical, and feasible, and will be a public benefit. We'd recommend it be approved at this point, and then moved on to the viewers and the final engineer's report. It's a summary of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck and James. Thank you much. And at this time, we'll open the hearing for public comment. And of course, this hearing is being recorded, so please state your name and address for the record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone wishing to make a public comment regarding Judicial Ditch 33? May come forward anytime at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Minky.
Get this out of the way.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is David Mingy, and I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Division of the Isaac Walton League of America. Fortunately, I'm here with my hearing aids because it is a challenge to pick up everything that's being said, and I appreciate the sound system that you have in place. First, I'd like to emphasize that neither I nor the engineers nor the Isaac Walton League are anti-agriculture. This is not, should not be understood to be an attack on farming or on our rural way of life. And indeed, many of us have lived for decades on farms and have good friends who are in farming. It rather is a concern about how do we balance our efforts to deal with excess water. And this is a challenge that's haunted civilizations for thousands of years. And some parts, it's too much water, some parts, it's too little water. But it's a struggle over who's going to have the optimum supply and how dependable will that optimum supply be. And here, I'd have to say that the concerns that have surfaced are often downstream communities. And it's also a concern about which parts, let's say the Minnesota River watershed, are contributing the most to the problems that the downstream communities are burdened with. The downstream communities certainly include Dakota County, and you've heard from Dakota County previously in connection with Ditch 35 improvements. And it was not intended, I don't think, by your colleagues to be any kind of a hit on Blue Earth County, but just, remember that here we are with Pool 2 caused by the dam at Hastings, and the barge channels, and the barge slips, and all of the dredging that has to be done, and then immediately below us is Lake Pepin, which is filling in at many times the rate that it did historically. And indeed, Lake Pepin, the upper half, is projected to be a swamp by the end of the century, with a shipping channel down the middle. So, I mean, this is a very difficult situation, everyone recognizes, because certainly Blue Earth County commissioners and government is trying to do the best it can by the farming community and the cities in Blue Earth County. And you don't want the Dakota County people or Winona County people making decisions about drainage in Blue Earth County.
Mr.
And you
Chair,
don't want the
one
state
minute.
to be coming in, making the decisions about drainage in Blue Earth County. So we have a situation where you're representing, or you're elected by people here in Blue Earth County, but in a way, you're making decisions on behalf of the state or the watershed. And I don't envy you. That's, in many ways, it's impossible. Asking you to do something that the political system is not really capable of doing otherwise to anyone's satisfaction. So, having said all of this kind of chatter, where are we headed here? Well, first I'd like to emphasize that the Blue Earth Le Sueur River Complex is identified as, by far really, the largest contributor of sediment and pollutants to the upper Mississippi. Not just to the Minnesota, but to the areas downstream of Fort Snelling. And I'd imagine that only changes when you get down and the Des Moines River and some of the Illinois rivers hit the Mississippi. So the Le Sueur River has been intensively studied, and the problems have been documented in published reports, peer-reviewed journals, and all of that kind of stuff. The Isaac Walton League is fortunate to have 3 engineers who have volunteered and contributed substantially to all of our efforts. And these are people from Barr Engineering, I mean, one of the most highly regarded engineering consulting firms in our region of the United States.
Thank you. The 3 minutes are up. I don't know.
What's in my statement is largely prepared by them.
Speak up, he can't hear you.
I'm
I
sorry.
was saying that your 3 minutes are up.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me simply say, to conclude, that you're faced with this tough decision, and I would urge that you make the decision with the best information that you can obtain, and that an environmental assessment worksheet would help you in that task. So that's one concluding observation. Thank you for the opportunity to appear.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Farr. All right. Do we have anyone else wishing to comment on Judicial Ditch 33 at this point?
I've got a couple questions for Chuck.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Okay. The last time for anybody wishing to comment on Judicial Ditch 33? Okay. If not, there'll be, if there are no additional comments at this point, we'll close the public comment portion and bring the issue back to the board for further action.
I've got
So
a
we have
question.
question?
I got a question for Chuck. First of all, what's the total distance that we're talking about for the replacement?
Just
You
pull
can
it
go
up
by
here.
feet, or you can go by...
Yeah. The total footage, just want to get it right, is 2,200 feet.
2,200 feet,
2,200 feet of tile.
which is what, 2/3 of a mile?
Yeah, a little less than half a mile.
Less than half a mile.
And the entire system has 16,000 feet of
Right.
tile.
I have to get my mileage in feet
Yep.
segment going here. And are we talking about putting any larger pipes down than that were in there originally?
Yes. The current outlet is a 26-inch tile. We're proposing to put in a 36-inch tile.
And what's the reason for that?
The reason for that is that there's been other improvements in the upper part of the watershed. So you've got, you kind of got a bottleneck where you've got a 26-inch tile, a 24-inch tile, a 15-inch tile, all coming into an 18 and 26-inch tile.
Okay.
So what happens is that, first off, that tile is near failure, and because of the lack of capacity, the water pools near the outlet, and you can kind of see it on this picture, and then overflows down into the river. So we're proposing to just put that into the pipe, because the 3 tile coming in,
It's gonna,
overwhelm it, it pops out, so we're proposing to take that to the
that's
river.
all I needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Chuck, I had a question for you also, Mr. Chair. So if you repaired the 26-inch tile to work properly, what coefficient was that at?
It's at a .19,
Okay,
but by statute, because they don't make 26-inch tile anymore, you could repair that to a 30-inch tile.
30-inch, yep.
We are gaining a couple feet of depth. If the main line were ever to fail, there are some shallow portions of it where you could put it at the appropriate depth upstream in the future.
And they talked about boring underneath the wetland. For some reason, that sounds really expensive.
That would
The
be...
rim easement.
Yeah, that would be very expensive. That distance is, I believe it's about 1,300 feet.
Oh my
And-
God.
And so the cost to bore that line would probably be 4 times the cost to open cut it.
Which doesn't cost the county, it costs the farmer that owns the property.
Yeah, it would probably make the project not cost effective.
Thank you.
You'll restore it back to the original after you open cut it.
Yeah, you can open cut it, and we've included a native grass seeding. We would
That's
get-
all part of the
Right.
bid.
And
Yeah, it's part
I
of the project.
understand that, but I was just referring back to the DNR letter that came before, that talked about boring, and I'm going, that is so much cost non-effective that,
Agreed.
okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Chuck.
I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chair. If you would like, I would entertain a motion, or I would move a motion to accept the findings and orders such subsequently amended in order that the detailed survey and viewers report be completed for the proposed project.
And I will second that
Second by
motion.
Vance. That's why we're at that stage for this, so if there are no more comments from the board, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. I want to thank everyone for coming today and for your input, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Mr. Chair, can we just take 5 and do a change up? I want to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, 10 o'clock. Almost. Let's continue, and we have,
You're ready.
ready now, we'll continue. And we have again in front of us the
Jail.
jail intercom systems with Mr. Mike Mauer. And, okay, we got Jocelyn and Jason Brown. We have, come on up, Mike.
You guys come up here, Mike.
Come on up, yeah, come right up to the, right up here.
We're good.
All of you can
Y'all
come
can
up.
come up and sit
There's
down
room for all three of you.
and join us.
And maybe just introduce each of yourselves again. For the record, we'll continue.
Well, I don't think I have to introduce myself.
Well,
I've been here before, though.
Mike Mauer.
Jason Brown?
Jocelyn Lockmiller.
All right, good. You're starting it off, Mike?
Yeah, I'll just start off to let you know that even though the Justice Center seems like it's new to all of us, we did open in 2009, and it's been some of the technology is actually reached its end of its life. We've been slowly replacing some of it. It just doesn't seem like it's been open that long. But the intercom system in the jail has reached the end of its life. We've had to do several repairs to it. Jason has been involved in working with Acra Controls. It's affected operations a couple of times when it's went down. We had budgeted $175,000 for 2022 to fix it, but due to inflation, it has went up about $214.66. Therefore, we had to bring it to the board because we exceeded our budget by $216.66 and are looking for approval just to update the system so that we can continue operations.
I'll move approval.
Been moved by Kip.
Second.
Second by Vance. Any further discussion?
I got a
Question?
comment. We were on our regional radio board meeting the other day, and we were having technical issues with our phones and technology, as we always do. And at about that time, we were talking about the crucialness of a good system in place so you can communicate in emergency situations when people's lives are at stake. And I just said, this is frustrating to us, and we don't have someone dying in front of us or someone that's trying to escape from the jail. And so that technology is very important that we keep it up to date and actively working very well. So thanks for that.
Anything else?
No.
And you're right, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, Mauer. We were both very big piece of that, so.
I know. It wasn't too long. All right. Okay, thank you. And
Thank you.
Got a vote.
We got a vote.
Yeah.
So I have a motion in front. Will you do that?
Yep,
There's a
motion is
and
seconded.
a second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Carries.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
See, Jason, they drug you all the way over here and you didn't even have to say
Yeah, you
anything.
didn't have to say anything.
Still worth it.
Technical support's worth
Yes.
having there. Thank you, Jazzy.
Thank you, guys. And we have our library.
Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly.
You can come up here,
Come on
Kelly.
up. Yeah, you come
Oh.
on right up.
Come on up. Come
Yeah, you
up
come
in
right up
front.
and I guess introduce yourself
Okay.
again.
I'm Kelly McBride. I'm the Library Services Director for Blue Earth County.
Good morning, Kelly.
Unlike their intercom system, our shelving, which I'm here to talk to you about, is older than I am. It's 35 years old. I'm respectfully asking that you approve the purchase of the new shelving. We've been talking about this for a number of years, and we've been working on it for the past year with library staff, the library board, and then a fantastic representative from Library Furniture International. And I think we're putting forth a really good plan. The shelving, like I said, is outdated. It's, we get a lot of comments at the library that it's dingy and dark, but it goes beyond aesthetics. It's also very high, which impedes our view of the library. So lower shelving, which is the standard now in public libraries, would allow us to see the entire space, and that's great for safety reasons. Also, the shelving we have right now, it's not as functional. We can't, due to ADA, to comply with ADA requirements, we don't use the bottom shelf and we don't use the top shelf. The library or the shelving we propose will be, all the shelves will be able to be utilized. And then it impedes light. We get comments often from patrons who have a difficult time seeing the titles and authors of books in our shelves. So we're hoping that you'll approve the purchase of the new shelving.
I would move to approve.
Oh, Vance made it easy.
Second?
It's been seconded by Kip. Any discussion or questions?
Well, being on the board and having many conversations with Kelly and the librarians, I certainly see the issues that are going on. And I think, we've done so much with the library the last years, and it'd be nice to really get that improvement. And also with those real high shelvings, it's hard for the people that are somewhat shorter in stature to reach the books that they need to be. So it's positive all the way around.
All right.
Sounds like an exciting addition to the library.
It's going to make a big difference. Yeah.
Good.
You say they're like metal then, or are they?
A combination.
Combination
Yep.
metal and wood?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It should look good.
They will look very nice.
All right. Well, hearing no other questions, discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, carries.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Great.
Go back and have fun with your program today.
I will. The animals are arriving.
The animals are right.
We got some of that here. Yeah. Okay. Continuing on, we have Human Services, and we have, oh, good, we got Kelly here.
Now we expect this to be just about as fast as the last two. Maybe not. Maybe not.
How come?
Miracles happen.
We got,
Okay? We believe in
we
miracles.
got plenty of time.
We got lots of time. We're in no hurry.
Three of us can't make it.
Yeah, you only got 3 of us to ask questions.
Yes.
That's right.
And we can't talk as much as they normally have five.
Well, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you for hearing us today. I have 4 action items that I'll bring to your attention. First off, 2 of those under supportive housing. The comprehensive housing contract. Blue Earth County contracts with Hearth Connections to provide housing funds, rental assistance for participants in the supportive housing program. Our overarching contract was signed in 2001, so this is an addendum to that contract. The new conditions are to be more specific about monthly households served and estimated grant amounts. The HUD grant is for 1 year, and that's $138,000 plus for 20 households, and Minnesota Housing Fund is a 2-year contract, $302,000, almost $303,000 for 17 households. Hearth will continue to provide the administration of the rental assistance, and the term of that contract is from execution to December 31st of 23. And then next is Community Living Infrastructure Grant from DHS, providing support for people with housing instability who want to live in the community. This is our second Community Living Infrastructure Grant that we've received. It's a one-time specific funding opportunity. Our partner counties are Blue Earth, Le Sueur, Rice, and Nicollet is also interested in joining with kind of our sub-regional efforts in housing here as well, but that has not been finalized. This serves people with disabilities and low income, so those are the criteria. And we're looking for people who are at risk of homelessness or need help maintaining their housing stability. Expenses for this grant include lease, rent deposit, security, utility setups, and then the big one is essential furnishings. That is an unusual one, like even our emergency assistance, we're not able to do furnishings, so this is new ability to do that. So that was very attractive to ourselves and our team, just because there's a lot of people with those kind of needs. So new grant for our sub-region, the amount $414,700, 22-month grant cycle from June 1st of 22 through March 31st of 24. And then I have one other section here, Mr. Chair, for public health with 2 items as well. The first of those, and Kelly's here, so if you have questions, she can give you the correct answers. I can give you an answer. I'll show you the right.
Should be the correct.
Yeah. So Department of Human Services Child and Teen Checkup. It serves children birth to age 20 who are enrolled in medical assistance and in need, or our duties to make sure that their needs for health care and medical care are provided. We also address barriers such as limited English proficiency and transportation. The funding got complex here on us this last year, and we knew it was coming. 2022 was split between 2 budget periods. The total eligible children were over 4,000, and our amount that we're paid is $13.25 per child. The second half of the year then is where the change hit, and our second half is at $55,358, which is a $34,000 decrease from the first half of the year. We knew this was coming and it was expected, and so Kelly's worked with her team for a work plan and staff duties to be adjusted for the decrease in funding. The term of this contract is July 1st through December 31st. The reason, I believe, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the kind of macro reason of the reduction is that they're allowing other direct care providers to also do the child and teen checkup work. And so we're splitting the pot is why that was reduced. It's not a reduction in service in the community, or we hope it won't be, but other people can pick up that work. Is that correct?
The healthcare clinics can pick up the patients who have identified them as their primary healthcare clinic. So the Mankato Clinic opted in to serve, some of the services to their patients.
So that'll still be a continuous service, and hopefully nobody will get left behind.
Right.
But they can just use a provider they've been using for other things.
More choice.
Correct.
Oh.
And we work closely with the clinic through this
you'll be
program and through many other programs. So I would expect people in the community might not even know there is a shift.
Okay.
Because we work that closely together.
Perfect.
And then finally, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the public health item on emergency preparedness, this is Department of Health. I guess the first one is our child and teen checkup comes through DHS. This is Department of Health. We're increasing our ability to maintain, increasing our ability and maintaining our ability to do operational readiness with public health, working with other local emergency providers. Our charge is to build up both our capacity and our readiness. You'll see in the narrative some of those examples of countermeasures, surge management, surveillance, and investigation. The work is done with partners in these other entities, and there's been just a slight decrease amount, 48,400, and I'm sorry, 48,151 is the new amount. It was a $300 reduction. The increased staffing costs, the funding will support around 15 hours of staff per week in this area, and our staff work in concert with the South Central Healthcare Coalition. The term of this grant, July 1st, 22 through June 30th of 23. I do want to continue to recognize Kelly. She's put in a lot of work, obviously, in this area with the pandemic, but then especially that bridge that we had in good standing, but really was developed with the South Central Healthcare Coalition. They really worked really closely together and did a great job through this. And not fully out of the woods yet, we know that, but we're getting there. So those are the items I have for today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Holly, anything else to add? You're all right? All right, Kelly's okay? Sure. Right, go ahead.
I move to approve. Second.
It's been moved by Vance and seconded by Kip. Okay. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a few informational discussion items. I'm going to pick out the middle one in your list, MIN choices, because there was a crossover with adult services. I'm going to let Kelly present on her part of MIN choices and the public health items that are in your packet. And then she'll also give us a COVID update and talk a little bit about some of the other programming areas that, as you can imagine, maybe haven't had the attention that we normally would give them because of the pandemic. So she'll just give the board an update on those good things we're up to. The slides I'm looking at are the ones that I think are just in bold black. I'll show you the first one. It has a chart. It looks like this. Yep. And there's just two of these. The first one, actually, I'm going to spend not a lot of time on. Lynette, our supervisor, is able to grab up this data. This is provided by Human Service, Department of Human Service, but it does include some crossover data with Kelly's shop over 65. So it's a little convoluted, and we included it in the packet because that's how it's pulled. And if you ever saw anything, you'd say, hey, why don't our numbers show? This is what DHS has. The next slide, table 2, is the one from our data, and I think that's a little more accurate as far as extracting the 2 different missions we have, under 65 and over 65. And in this case, it's the under 65 population. You'll see the breakout of all the different assessment types over the past 2 years, 2020 and now 2021, as we're into 2022, obviously. The pieces that I keep bringing back to the board that I think you would have some interest in is the bullet points, the assessment numbers overall that we did increase from 2020 to 2021 to the tune of 43 individuals, so that number keeps going up. The location assessments, which I think the board's aware of, is the whole issue is that people, when they're in our community, even if they're imported from another county, we do the assessments in this area. So this is that place where ourselves and St. Louis County and a few others have a lot of kind of a hub mission in our community. And so it does put some burden on this area for our assessors, because we do have folks coming from elsewhere and living in facilities in Blue Earth County. You'll see at the end of that second bullet, we completed 358 of those types of reassessments for other counties. And then the final bullet, which is not new to the board either, but the very end of that third bullet is 11.5 hours per assessment is what we're averaging, which is a really big number.
It's just phenomenal.
Yes.
I can't even wrap my head around that number.
And I always say this to you all, I know you've heard it before, but like when you come in my old profession of doing office therapy, you usually have an hour, hour and a half to do an assessment. You come up with a diagnosis that really does stick with you if you are diagnosed with a mental health diagnosis. Do that in an hour and a half, and this one is just a lot more intense than that. And my worry always in this is that it's very onerous on the front end, but it also, just like with any assessment, things can change, especially in these populations where the functioning changes, there's a situational change. So it might be a month later and things are quite different because of a circumstance. And so I've always wondered about this, and it's actually gone up in the amount of time. It's a very thorough assessment, I don't doubt that, and I'm sure that they're very accurate, and I know the staff take them very seriously, but they do create quite a resource grab for us when it comes to staffing. So I'm going to hand it over to Kelly, and she can do the public health slides that are in your packet, and then she'll go into COVID as well.
All right.
Thanks, Phil. Kelly?
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me, allowing me to present 4 of our many programs, and certainly ask questions as we go along. So the first program that's in the packet is Child and Teen Checkup. Child and Teen Checkup is as Phil referenced during the contract description, provides outreach and support to children 0 to 21 to reduce barriers to receiving health care, because of course prevention is key. We want people to be diagnosed early, receive preventative treatments. Introduction letters, that first graph on your left tells you how many introduction letters we have sent in a given year, and last year we sent 8,670 letters, and then we follow up with phone calls and outreach to those folks, not all of them, but those who are new to medical assistance and those who are due for their annual checkup. So we outreach to try and resolve barriers such as transportation, language, or a whole host of other issues that can prevent folks from accessing care, including sometimes they think it's going to be too expensive, and then we work through those pieces too. Next year's numbers will look a little different, of course, because of the changes in the programs. But as you look at this chart on your right, you can see a decrease over during COVID. For outreach, some of our staff were involved with the COVID response. So our outreach to these folks decreased a little bit, but we expect that to rebound this year. Questions on Child and Teen?
So maybe I missed it, but so what's the outreach? Is that just the follow-up of the letter?
It is. It's
Okay.
actually reaching out via text or via phone
Okay.
to actually talk with folks. And then one of the great things that we've established is some of my other programs, we wrap around folks. So sometimes that call we end up referring to maternal child health services or family home visiting or some of the other programs within human services to help support them. So a lot of things can really happen during that call.
So of the 8,600 letters you send out, what's your goal? Just to try to reach as many of them as you can, or do all of them need to be in the system? Or, I mean, I guess I'm not really sure what the 8,600 is, so.
So that's the letters, all
Yeah.
of the letters that are sent out.
It's sent out. So
to-
do you have a number in mind that you want to try to reach out to or get in the system?
How
Or
we
actively in the system?
Yep. So how we manage that is that we print out lists of the folks who are new or have received services or are eligible for their annual health care, and we start reaching out to as many as we can
Okay.
with the hours that we have. So sometimes a phone call takes 5 minutes, sometimes a phone call takes a half an hour. So how many we reach, we don't have a specific goal, but we try to get to all of them,
Okay.
as many of them as we can.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Brender, I feel like one of the underlying issues is when people qualify for medical assistance, it means that finances are an issue for that family. And we see that as a gateway issue to say it's easy to start letting medical appointments go to the wayside, or if a child has any special need, that it might be a lower priority. And we can come alongside that family and really help, like you said, the holistic wraparound of get them a referral and maybe send somebody out to the home so they don't have to leave work. We just see that as the trigger issue is really that they're on medical assistance, which means that those finances are, suspect. It doesn't mean everybody on medical assistance needs special help. I think that would go too far the other way, but that we want to politely ask, do you have any special needs that we can come alongside and help with so that we don't create bigger problems down the road?
Well, that's the biggest thing we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid bigger problems down the road. We always have this conversation about, how does prevention work? Well, nobody can really put a number on it because it's just so hard to quantify.
Yep.
And so this is just a way to keep someone else from having a more serious issue, and I certainly support that, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and your efforts are worthwhile.
Yeah, we've had our staff that actually work in this program, even with the funding decrease, have been here a long time and are very skilled at talking with families and making them feel very comfortable.
But we can relate to the 5-minute or the 30-minute conversation, so don't worry about that.
Yep.
All right. The next program is about our WIC clinic. So WIC is a nutrition education program to support pregnant women, new mothers, babies, and children under the age of 5. They continue to function under the public health emergency, so clients are able to continue to be seen remotely. The cumulative totals that you see at the bottom are the number of households, are the unduplicated monthly participants that are issued benefits. Participants can be counted up to 4 times a year. So I'll use my family as an example, and I was a WIC participant at one time. I would go in for an appointment. I had 2 kids, so there were 3 of us within that appointment that were served with benefits.
Is it?
It's a great program.
It is. It is. It takes that just a little bit of edge off the rising cost of food, and for some of our infants in the community, and mine were included about 23 years ago, hemoglobin checks and weight checks and some other services that are very vital to the health of our children.
How are we doing on the with the baby formulas?
Oh, yeah, with the recalls.
Recall.
So, yep, our staff have been very busy answering calls from concerned moms who haven't been able, and families who haven't been able to find formula. They've worked with the state level WIC to open up where we usually only have a few options. The state has opened up a lot of options for formula, so that has helped. We were just on the verge of the plant opened and there was going to be more options and more formula, and then of course they experienced flooding and the plant had to close again. So I have not heard if they've been able to reopen quickly at this point, but my staff are involved with monitoring that and responding to families.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next program is slide has our First Steps program. So First Steps is that public-private nonprofit partnership between Blue Earth County, Mankato Clinic Foundation, and Greater Area Mankato United Way. We provide support prenatally and postpartum for women and families to support healthy birth outcomes. So infants who are born healthy have a better chance of being ready for kindergarten as they move through those developmental years. As you can see, we continue to outreach more than 85% of our folks prenatally, with a large majority, 57%, last year in 2021 in the first trimester. Typically, the folks that we see in second trimester or third trimester established care later, but we are able to serve them as well, and some we pick up after they have delivered the child. Sometimes they move in new to the community. The great thing about this program is it is available to everyone. It doesn't matter what health system you go to or if you even don't have a primary care provider in the area. The Greater Area Mankato United Way funding allows us to have a broader reach. My staff is actually embedded within, physically in the OB department at the Mankato Clinic and is able to walk over to Mayo as they need services as well.
Oh, nice.
So it's, instead of, well, I'm going to refer you to a program and there's a fax, and we kind of lose things. People who are really struggling or, and some of the things they're struggling with is we have had families living in cars with toddlers. So they're homeless with small children, or they're living in a domestic abusive relationship, or they're just getting sober, or there's just a whole host of factors that family struggles with. They can just walk the person down the hall and say, I have somebody who can help you with that. And Teresa is right there to help. So
That's good.
So, and then the last program, review this morning, is our home and community-based services program and managed care. So our county mandate is for the assessments, as Phil talked about, and providing services through elderly waiver. Then we also fulfill the managed care role for UCare, Medica, and Blue Plus. And this helps our community members. So instead of having 2 case managers, they're able to have 1 that help them navigate the system, those who are over 65. So if you look at the chart below, in 2019, if you look right to the end of the year, we had 744 clients, and then we go up to 780 in 2020, 849 in 2021, and we're up to 861 as of right now this year. The increase of clients is noted in the next column, and then I also included a column for turnover. So we had 177 people leave our program. Sometimes they move out of the area, sometimes they pass away each year. So those numbers aren't static. There's a lot of turnover, and with new clients comes new paperwork. And those are new assessments. So definitely new folks, we need to get to know them, so it takes a little bit more time to do that. And then the next slide is the number of assessments. We track this through public health systems and the staff ratio over the years. So we were 1 to 99 in 2019. We were up to 104 per full-time FTE in 2020, 110 at the end of 2021, and we are down to 93 this year, and that's with the shift of one of our positions from, I don't know how to describe it, the kind of our family side of the house to this. So we didn't, that decrease in funding with Child and Teen Checkup and some other grants, we were able to move this position and fill some need. So that's been a great relief for staff to get down to 93 again. That's the end of my report.
That's the end of your report.
Of this report. And I'll move into COVID.
COVID stuff.
I was waiting for the...
Good to move into, all right, wonderful. Minnesota Department of Health continues to, I'm sure as you see the number of cases in the counties, we see increase and decrease daily and weekly. The vaccines continue to prevent that severe disease, illness, and hospitalization. So they're working as they should. According to the state-defined priorities for local public health, we continue to provide vaccinations monthly at the Blue Earth County Jail. We continue to coordinate for homebound individuals. So we pair those 2 on the same day to be efficient. We go and do 1 vaccination clinic, and then we move into our homebound. And we still really strive to use that entire vial and not waste doses of vaccine. We're supporting our healthcare partners in vaccinations of children aged 6 months to 5 years old, but are not planning vaccination clinics of our own right now. Surveys that have been sent out have shown that parents really are preferring for that age group to go to their primary healthcare provider. So we work with Mayo, Mankato Clinic, Open Door, and other healthcare providers for that. We'll monitor, of course, demand and need as this new level of vaccination rolls out. Just COVID-19 can, in children, I think sometimes there's this belief that it is a mild illness in children. It can be, but it also can cause a serious illness called multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And that includes serious inflammation of heart, lung, blood vessels, kidneys, digestive systems, the brain, the skin, the eyes. So it's for a child that has that complication, it's pretty serious, and the vaccine can prevent that. Just thinking through like how often does this happen? So in the months after having that infection, children are 2.5 times more likely to have elevated enzymes that indicate liver damage after having that inflammatory system, and 3.3 times more likely to have elevated bilirubin, which is a byproduct of the liver's breakdown of red blood cells that cause jaundice. So that's that yellowing. You see that usually through yellowing of the skin. So pretty serious consequences for our kids who have that. We are moving along with the state into managing COVID more as an endemic disease versus pandemic, but that's a progression. The variants continue to evolve at a pretty high rate. They want to see that stabilize before they move fully from pandemic to endemic management of the disease. We, in local public health, continue to adjust our size and scope of incident command. We continue to vaccinate and still have programs that are guided by the federal public health emergency, such as our WIC clinic and our those waivers for the over 65. We also continue to be involved in other prevention and response efforts with other vaccine preventable diseases. So after some of the COVID restrictions were lifted, our active TB cases quickly increased to 3. This means we've already completed 3 contact investigations and tracing this year already. We're also monitoring the situation with monkeypox. On May 24th, we forwarded a health advisory to our healthcare partners, hospitals, clinics, to consider monkeypox in people with an unexplained rash or travel in the last 30 days, along with some other factors. The concern about this particular zoonotic infection is that before May of 2022, the cases outside countries where this is endemic were rare. Since mid-May, over 15 countries who typically don't, or that normally don't have cases of monkeypox, have had cases with sometimes unexplained origins. So something we're just monitoring and watching along with the state. And then another HON that went out was regarding the 2 confirmed cases of measles. We forwarded another health advisory that included information on the 2 lab-identified cases, and to consider measles on your differential for someone who has a rash. There were other clinical considerations. The possibility of secondary cases should be considered through July 1st. So while we think the quick identification by the healthcare system reduced exposure, there are still potential. Measles is very contagious. So I could be in here with measles. If you are unvaccinated or have other risk factors that put your risk for measles, you could walk through the same airspace. It's an airborne illness. It's highly infectious. 9 out of every 10 people who let's say are unvaccinated, are exposed to measles, will contract measles. So it's not 4 out of 10, like 9 out of 10. So very, very infectious. Our concerned because our vaccination rates have declined in the health advisory that we sent out. 2-year-olds who have at least 1 dose of what's called the MMR, or measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, by 24 months declined from 81.4% in 2019 to 79.3% in 2021. And that sounds like a small percentage, but that's a lot of people that are no longer vaccinated for measles. And measles can be very serious. 1 in 5 people not vaccinated are hospitalized. 1 out of every 20 children with measles gets pneumonia, is diagnosed with pneumonia, and then 1 out of every 1,000 children will develop encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain and can lead to hearing loss and other developmental disabilities. So we're monitoring that as well.
Get your vaccine, yeah.
That's right.
Very much so, yeah. We've seen a dip. We're seeing a little bit of an increase, so that's been good as people are able to access their doctors after COVID. So yeah, we're really working in concert with our healthcare partners in our MTRAC program to increase those rates.
So that vaccine will actually keep you from getting the virus?
It will keep
Not
you.
like COVID, you can still get it, but you won't be as sick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. So, one last update on the emergency preparedness topic, but I'm happy to report that we have resumed communication exercises. We had our first exercise in 3 years, building skills, deepening relationships between emergency management, public health, clinic, hospitals, EMS, and nursing homes. So it was just, we learned a lot more about each other. We're all good at thinking on our feet and responding to unexpected situations, but these exercises deepen our relationships and decrease the number of things that we have to respond to that we hadn't thought of. So it was great. And we were actually, it was at the end of the exercise, we talk about what did we learn, what was good, and our EMS and emergency management partners actually recognized, they said prior to COVID, they couldn't imagine a role of public health at the table. And after COVID, when we were all together in the EOC for a number of months, they said we can't imagine going into responses without public health, disease, or others. So
wow.
That was wonderful to hear from our EMS partners.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just one thing that Kelly talked about there was the HAN network, HAN, it's Health Alert Network. And we talk a lot about things that aren't working or things that break or bend and don't work very well, but this is actually a system that I think works very well. And so like if Hennepin County in their medical services has a case of monkeypox, it'll get sent out to everyone so people know just that it's out there or whatever. And it really works slick. I have not ever heard any complaints. And sometimes there's the over information, you get everything. It's like, no, they filter it out so like, it might be one case, but it's something you want to hear about, like monkeypox. You want to know about that. So, and then you resend that to, if it comes through public health, to other local providers too. So there's this whole really slick network that we don't talk about with the board very much, but that's an area of strength right there. That works really well.
It is, and we're there's a new state system that has made it even easier to do that. And yeah, it was used for our outbreak for TB, where there was a HAN set out across the state to remind all providers to consider this as a potential diagnosis for respiratory illness. So it does work very well. It's very efficient. It's the exact amount of information our clinicians need to consider some very serious things that are going on in our state.
That's good to hear. Yeah. It works.
It's something that works really well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For all your information and your presence here. Thank you. All right. At this point, I guess we got.
Mr. Chair, item number 8 on your agenda is the Commissioner District 1 vacancy. I'll maybe just introduce this issue and turn it back over to the board, but with Commissioner Landkamer's resignation from the board, Minnesota Statute 375.101 outlines kind of the requirements that address how the board is to go about addressing that vacancy. It really gave the board 2 options. One is to hold a special election, the other being an appointment. Because Commissioner Landkamer's term had less than 1 year remaining, that appointment option was available to the board, and the board has indicated to staff that that was your preference. The statute also then goes on to describe, if you're going to go down that appointment process, that there are certain steps that the board needed to do. One is to hold a public hearing to hear testimony from members of that district in terms of what kind of qualifications or experience they might be looking for. The board completed that public hearing on April 19th because it was required within 30 days of the vacancy being created. The other element in the statute in terms of requirements is a requirement to notify in this case city council members or public officials in that district of the vacancy, and so we have sent a letter to the city council in Mankato to complete that requirement as well.
And it's my understanding today that the board maybe would like to appoint an individual, and so staff have prepared a resolution, if that is the wishes of the board, that would address one kind of remaining step in the process beyond just the appointment of the individual, but also clarifying that we've met all those statutory requirements. So I would turn it back over to the board to see how you'd like to proceed.
Okay. Everybody, I guess it's the three of us. We did one application. Vance, you wanted just to give a little summary because you had reached out to the
You got
person.
her complete name, I don't have.
Julianne Wiersema.
Wiersema.
Don't worry, I had to think about that too.
This last week, Chair Pifo and myself interviewed Julianne Wiersema for the position of County Commissioner District 1 in Blue Earth County. I think both of us were impressed with her, impressed with her excitement to come on to the board, and her knowledge of local government and what she sees should be done. Upon completion of that interview, Chair Pifo and myself spoke and decided to bring a recommendation to the board to have Ms. Wiersema complete Commissioner Landkamer's time up until the election date in November, which is, I believe, 5 months away. And this is what we're doing today. And so I would make the motion to offer the position to Julianne Wiersema.
Thank you, Vance.
Second.
So it's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, she was a engaging individual, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today. But she seemed very interested in.
Yes, well, and she's got the knowledge of local government and what in the background, and certainly
the text, yeah,
and certainly is a very positive individual.
Yep.
Good.
Yes, she is. So, all right, well, everybody has a motion in front of us. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. And then she'll be first notified, and she'll be
Here next meeting.
Next meeting.
All right, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 6 in your packet are the county board minutes for June 7th of this year.
I'll move approval.
Second. Seconded by Vance. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries.
Next are the bills for the 2 weeks indicated.
Move approval.
Second.
Vance, second by Kip.
I've got a few.
Got a few questions. You're gonna stump the man. Okay.
Yeah. Holtzmeyer Construction for $422,000. What was that on?
That is a public works contract. I believe it is a bridge based on the number, but I'd have to double check which one. It's not clear on here.
Okay. And while you're at it, M&K Bridge Construction for $304,000. Obviously a bridge construction.
Yeah, there's actually 2 of them. One is for $271,000, another one for $33,000.
I usually pick the larger amount.
Pardon me?
I usually pick the larger amount. Mm-hmm. And OMG Midwest Incorporated for $1,579,000.
The largest portion of that is the overlays for this year.
Okay. And let's see, we got WW Blacktopping for $327,000.
That is work on CASAS 7.
Okay. And let me see here. I think I got one more. Mathewitz for $1,544,000. I imagine that's County Road 1.
County Road 1.
I'm sure it is.
Getting to the end.
I can double check.
Figure we get lots of time today.
It is County Road 1.
You know, your main emphasis is how expensive it is to run a county and take care of our roads and bridges and stuff like this. But thank you very much.
And you have a good point there, Commissioner. All right. Hearing no other questions then upon, all those, yeah, we had the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. All right.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, tab number 8 in your packet is the Human Resources Department agenda. Just have one action item for the board today, and that is the renewal of a health insurance plan. As the board is probably aware, we are switching from a self-insured plan to a fully insured health insurance plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. Our plan year runs from July 1st of 22 through June 30th of 23. We are switching to the fully insured because based on the projections of our self-insured experience, we would have seen quite a substantial increase in the neighborhood of 15 or 16%. This particular fully insured plan not only lowers that increase to a very modest amount, but also is a 3-year guaranteed not to exceed, I think it's 6.5%. So we felt that the time was right to shift to a fully insured option. We do have the option to go back to a self-insured down the road, but through the work of our insurance committee and USI as our consultant, I really feel that the fully insured option is the right way to go at this point.
I would move to approve.
Second.
Moved second to approve.
We had lengthy discussion about this at a work session also, and I think this is makes sense to me.
Yep.
And I know that, yeah, who's involved with it
Mhm.
as far as.
Thank you to the committee for all their hard work.
And it's a good rollout of it. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, carries. All right.
The informational items then, we have a couple of promotions, one a clerical specialist in public health to a case aide in the public health unit, and we've initiated to recruit a refill of that clerical specialist. Then we also had a promotion in our property and environmental resources department from a specialist 2 to an appraiser, so we've initiated recruitment to refill that specialist 2 position. We also have filled a part-time bailiff in the sheriff's office. We've also filled an assistant county attorney position in the county attorney's office. And then we've also filled a correctional officer in our jail. We've also hired an appraiser in our property and environmental resources department. We did also have a resignation of a part-time library clerk, so we've initiated recruitment to refill that position. And then we also had a resignation of an eligibility specialist in our human services department and have initiated recruitment to refill that position. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have on the human resources agenda.
Any questions of Bob on the?
I don't have any
Pretty
questions.
busy.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, item number 9 in your packet is the Veterans Court contract. This is a cooperative agreement between Blue Earth County Community Corrections and the state of Minnesota through the 5th Judicial District. This will bring us $104,000 over a 2-year period for our staff to provide case management services to clients in the Veterans Court. We also then, as a part of this agreement, will be asked to provide some case management for non-Blue Earth County participants. And so, just so you know, we're kind of expanding beyond just the Blue Earth County, but it does provide this funding to help support our staffing level. So, requesting board approval of this cooperative agreement.
So moved.
It's been moved by Kip.
Second.
Second by Vance. All right. Discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries.
Item number 10 in your packet then is a resolution approving a joint powers agreement between Blue Earth County and, again, the state of Minnesota. This will allow the sheriff's office and the county attorney's office to access the Minnesota Department of Public Safety BCA system. And so bringing that forward for the board's consideration today.
Okay.
I would move to approve.
Vance
Second.
moves and Kip seconds. Yeah, all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, then item number 11 is a financial status report for May 31st. This is the report that includes the first half of the property taxes. So it looks much better than the prior months have looked. So you'll see our total revenue at the end of May was a little over 45 million against expenditures of a little over 37 million. So we finally have revenue exceeding expenses. Going back to the top of the revenue lines of state and federal, a little bit of a concern there because it's obviously below our 41.7% target and also about half of what it was at this time last year. I think some driving factors there is the ARP funds were probably received last year a little earlier than they were this year. We have now received them, so you'll see that in June. And I also believe some of the turnback funds from County Road 1 were received in 2021, so that distorts that number a little bit. But still would like to see the total for 22 a little closer to our budget targets. Otherwise, I'd also draw your attention to the transportation sales tax line. You'll see that it's up 10.4% from the same time last year, so we continue to run very strong with our local option sales tax revenues. On the expenditure side, you'll see that our total expenditures are at about 35% of our budget, so a little bit under our target at this point. A lot of that is the results of contracts and fees, which would be our road projects, which you're starting to see in the bills now as projects have been rolling for a little while. So we'll start to catch up there. The personal services line, our salaries and benefits, you'll see is almost exactly on target for our budget, which is maybe a little bit unusual, but again, based on our settlements with our collective bargaining groups, we came in a little higher than what we had planned in our budget, so we probably will not see any excess in that budget line this year. In terms of the enterprise fund, our Ponderosa landfill, you'll see there the total revenues are at 1.7 million against expenses of 700,000. So we again this year are sitting in good position just because of no large equipment purchases or cell development. So we're putting a little bit into reserve with that enterprise fund at this point. The second page shows our cash and investment balances. This is kind of the high point of the year for us in terms of total available funds, sitting at 77.5 million against our 6-month target of 51 million. A little further down the page, you'll see our total county funds sit at 141.6 million, up a little bit from prior years, and so we continue to be in sound financial position.
The 141 does not have the money from the ARP?
It would.
Oh, that is in there. And how much was that? 6 million?
Well, it's 6.5 million each of 21 and 22.
So 22s is in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, probably not in this report because I don't think we received the funds until June.
Okay.
So that's still to show up.
Okay.
It's above.
Any other questions?
No? Anybody have any questions?
No.
Bob? Looks pretty good, really.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Then I guess that concludes everything you have for.
That's all I have,
okay.
Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Bob. Well, at this point, I guess we'll have our esteemed guests here. If Matt, you'd like to come forward, give a good update on Micah, and I guess if you want the other two to, yeah, they should come up too. They can all come up. Steve and Nancy, that'd be great.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's still morning.
Good to see y'all. It is wonderful to be here, as always.
We got
A beautiful
special
drive
chairs.
down.
Yeah, special chairs for you there too.
Was it special? Was it a nice drive this morning?
It was a very nice drive this morning. Got a little rain last night in the Twin Cities. And
greened it up a little
greened
more.
it up a little more.
Yeah, we didn't get no rain last night.
Well, good morning, as you said, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Inter-County Association. I want to just start, as always, thanking you for your longstanding membership in the association, and also as I look around the room, not only your longstanding membership, but I know that I see all of you, and you're all ready to and willing to help us out at the legislature and reach out to your members and participate in meetings to champion the priorities of the association, and that is invaluable as well. And as I get started with some thank yous, I want to thank Bob as well, and Josh, and really Bob's whole team. I know that we count on them for information and insights, which really helps bring the stories to our legislative advocacy on your behalf as well, and help articulate the needs of counties. While I'm at the thank yous, obviously we work closely with, depending on the issues, with quite a number of members from the legislative delegation that represents Blue Earth County, but given retirements, I really want to call out the work of Senator Julie Rosen, and we have worked with her over many number of years over many issues, and really will miss her support in championship and the work that we do for counties. We have, as we get into the presentation this morning and go to start with the second slide, I'm going to start with some recap. I'll have to say that disappointingly we revised the slides a little bit as of Friday afternoon of last week to remove what had been some of our remaining hope that there would be a special session to finish up the work, and we will still make a presentation this morning articulating both what happened in legislative session and really what was significantly on the table for counties and didn't happen. I know that there's going to be probably some continued chatter and hope that we would certainly embrace and support that there be a special session and finish up the work. But as of the end of last week, as you may have read, it appears quite likely that there will not be one. Senate Majority Leader Miller indicated that the Senate would not be making any more offers as part of those conversations, and so it appears like those discussions have come to an end. So I'm going to start where we started, a historic state budget surplus. And my original work is in state budgeting, and so I can't underscore that enough for all of you and for people who might be listening. $9.3 billion of state budget surplus in the general fund for fiscal 22-23, plus the state had $1.2 billion of one-time federal ARPA funds that had not yet been allocated at the start of session. In addition to that, there was an expected positive balance of $6 billion of additional resources in the tails period. If you sort of divide that in half for a 2-year biennium, in theory, there was about $3 billion of annual either tax cuts or additional spending that could have been accommodated in legislative decisions. And that's on those numbers that I'm giving you are on top of flush budget reserves. So this table just summarizes the state revenues and spending, and the bottom line highlighted in blue there shows really look at the bottom line as sort of the unduplicated amounts, the $9.3 billion of general fund surplus and $6 billion ongoing. If we flip to the next slide, it's just sort of broad scale where the session ended up on May 17th, a week before the end of scheduled end of session by Constitution. Again, the Constitution sets the end of the regular session. The governor and legislative leaders had reached a signed agreement to allocate what I refer to as the 4x4x4 agreement to allocate over 3 years $4 billion to tax cuts, $4 billion to new spending proposals across a wide variety of areas, and $4.2 billion of the remaining money was going to be left on the bottom line in addition to budget reserves. The conference committees were unsuccessful. All of that was expected to be part of a package. Of course, conference committees were unsuccessful at resolving differences, particularly in K-12 education, human services, public safety, transportation, and housing. There were tentative agreements that were reached but not passed on tax cuts and property tax relief, environment and energy, jobs and workforce programs, higher ed, and state agency appropriations. Now again, those conference committee tentative agreements were reached, but the intent was for there to be a whole package agreed to as part of the signed agreement on the 17th, and so those things did not pass as well. Some standalone bills did pass during session, including drought relief, ag, and most importantly, broadband funding, which is a priority for MICA and was championed by all counties. Mental health funding package, Nancy will talk about it. And of course, back in April, the legislature reached a bipartisan agreement to restore the unemployment insurance trust fund, and as well to put $500 million into frontline worker payments, and that is currently, those applications are underway, and that includes some classes of both public and private employers, including some classes of county and local government employers that may be eligible. That is being run entirely by the state, administered by state agencies. And of course the COVID workers' comp relief, which also impacts some county classes of employees, the presumption that if you acquire COVID and you're in those job classes, it's acquired as part of your workplace and is covered. That extends through January 13th of 2023. So going on to the next page, I'll focus on where I spend most of my time on your behalf, and Steve and Nancy will talk about their areas of priority. Really the only thing that passed in our tax and fiscal priorities was the broadband funding, and it was collectively the most significant package of broadband funding that has ever passed in the state. It included again, additional general fund money, $50 million, $25 million in 2023, $25 million in 2024. Plus there was the direction that $60.7 million of the federal ARPA funds, the capital project funds, these are the capital project funds that the state gets in addition to the state fiscal recovery funds. Those $60.7 million must be allocated to the federal or to the state broadband grant program. In addition, there's an expectation that the state will receive $100 million in federal IIJA funds for broadband purposes. Those will also go into the broadband grant program. Now, the thing that actually is probably the most significant change is that the legislature, in addition, put in place some policy changes around broadband. Right now, under current law, state broadband grants can only be up to 50% of the costs. As part of the package, they established a low-density population area program that BEAD is expected to implement, whereby in areas that end up being defined as low-density population areas, the grants can be up to 75% of the total project costs, and there's $30 million, up to $30 million that's set aside for that. There's also an amount of money that's set aside for a new program called the Broadband Line Extension Program. many of you may hear from constituents here and there that actually have broadband going through their area, but for whatever reason, there's individual properties, either homeowner properties or businesses that don't have service coming to their property. This program is set up that will allow, DEED will basically set up will collect addresses. So individuals will have a period of time to register with DEED as being a property that does not receive high-speed internet. DEED will then verify those and hold a reverse auction to find providers to complete extension of broadband to those properties. Each of those properties under the legislation is eligible for up to $25,000, or I should say the property. It won't. None of the money will actually go to the property owner. It will go to the vendor through the granting process. But up to $25,000 per property to complete broadband access. There's also money in there for broadband mapping, which of course is important to positioning local governments in cooperation with the providers and other advocates to put the grant applications together. So a lot going on, and we provided some information. There will be more detail in our summary, our written summary now, with there being a bit more of clarity about special session or not special session. We'll get our summary out in hard copy to your staff and to yourselves later this week. What did not pass, the omnibus tax bill would have just had a wealth of provisions aimed at property tax relief and support for the work that counties do. The tentative agreement that was in the tax conference committee included $30 million annually in increased county program aid. That would have been about $183,000 by estimates every year for Blue Earth County. There was $9.2 million annually for increased payment in lieu of taxes, much of that for northern Minnesota counties, but every county gets a small amount of appeal payments. $6 million for soil and water conservation districts every year. I believe that's about $68,000 for the SWCD here in Blue Earth. $30 million in reduction each year in state general property tax paid by businesses and seasonal recreational property. $175 million annually, roughly across the programs for renters, direct property tax relief, homeowner property tax refunds, and targeted refunds. There would have been there was an expanded homestead market value exclusion in the bill. There was expanded senior deferral program eligibility, and that's just some of the highlights. There were actually other targeted grant programs and relief in the bill as well, and no levy limits and no limited market value. I highlight the defensive posture there because that actually, there was a point towards the end of session where that was actively being considered, and Micah, along with county partners across the board and cities, collaborated to oppose that effort. So nonetheless, that did not pass. Our hope would be that if the expectation would be that that's where the legislature would pick up if there had been a special session or would still be a special session. It certainly is less clear and probably unlikely that this year's ending point will be next year's starting point if we don't start until next session. So with that, I would turn it to Steve to talk about transportation, and I'll come back a little bit at the end to wrap up.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Good to be in Blue Earth County. And as I begin my little discussion here on transportation, I recognize that I've got three commissioners who know a lot about it, and particularly Vance. We're in meetings together a lot over the course of the year, so I think everybody appreciates your specific work on this topic. What to say? Not much happened in reality, which was quite surprising from the standpoint that this legislative session followed the model of most successful sessions where we had 4 months of hearings, many months of work, too many meetings with individual legislators to count, and generally got positive feedback on everything, including the dialogue that took place in the committees. We had a significant transportation platform. All of those positions within the last 2 weeks of the session. We're in a position that historically you would say that's where you want to be to succeed. But we can't force them to vote if they don't want to vote. And in a number of cases, including transportation, you know, these bills were primed up, ready to go, but they never got to the floor for votes. So let me, before I tell you exactly what did not happen, let me just say that the precursor to this result maybe was set in place if you followed the hearing schedules of the House and Senate Transportation Committees. The House basically throughout the session had a number of hearings, and they focused mostly on transit, trains, active transportation, traffic safety, electric car infrastructure. Then over on the other side in the Senate, they weren't dealing with those issues basically at all. They were dealing with roads and bridges, specifically no trains, Department of Motor Vehicle issues, the so-called King Report, and of course they were raising fees on electric cars. So you could kind of see what was coming, a lot of division. But as we all know, having worked the legislature for decades, historically, you know, they take a look at those two opposing viewpoints and they find the middle. And you end up with what would have been, in my opinion, certainly one of the most successful sessions for transportation, if not the most successful session for transportation, based on what we were looking to achieve and what was there to happen, but for them choosing not to vote. And I think the single biggest impediment was partisan politics. And I'm not going to name names or point to one side or the other. It was just a black cloud over the whole process and got in the way of everything. The transportation issue that really became the focal point, and both sides were stacking their provisions up, you might say, on each end of the bookshelf, was the issue of how to deal with the proceeds from the sales tax on auto parts in terms of the full transfer. And the Senate position was 100% went to roads and bridges. The House's position was they didn't want to do it in the first place. They've historically had a position of not shifting money out of general funds into transportation or any other area that doesn't currently receive general funds because of all the other larger expenditures in the budget, health and human services, criminal justice, whatever. But that became the focal point of behind-the-scenes negotiations with the two chairmen, backed up by the position of their caucuses. And after several weeks of all of this sort of thing, the only movement was the House. They did come off their position of no transfer, and they got off their position of 40% for transit and dropped that to 20. So their position was 80-20. Roads and bridges, 80, transit, 20. The Senate never moved off their position. 100% roads and bridges, no transit, period. And that was something that did break the back. Now, you followed this close enough to know that in the last, I'd say 3, 4, or 5 sessions, when it came time for money, you know, the leadership to provide targets to different subject areas, most times transportation came up short. The other thing that made no result here really tragic was that this time around, the leadership gave transportation significant money. $360 million in fiscal year 22-23, $486 million in 24-25, and they both publicly agreed in a conference committee meeting that they both supported supplying the match money for the federal IIJA, the big infrastructure bill that was passed like a year ago. That was a common goal of the department, the House, the Senate, the governor. They publicly showed us where the money would be in the bill. It was about $40 million to start. They also had money in there for local county road and bridges before we even got to the bonding bill. And of course, they had their battle, which was holding everything up on sales tax. So the supplemental transportation budget bill was one of the two pieces. They had lots of meetings, had no real result, and they were very public about the fact that if they didn't resolve the issue of how to spend the transfer money on the sales tax and auto parts, they weren't moving anything, and in the end, that was the result. Correspondingly, you know, there was a bonding bill being shaped. Matt and I and others had numerous conversations like this with Tom Bach and Fooley and all the principal players, everybody wanted a bonding bill. And towards the end, the number became public, 1.4 billion plus anywhere from 150 to 400 million in cash. And there was also this issue of the Senate having 22 earmarked highway projects, of which 14 of them were in Micah County, so we had an interest in that. There was the issue of significant money for local county roads and bridges, and talking to Bach on the last day of the session, it sounded like what he was telling us was that they had settled on 75 million for each. Well, that number, if it had become law, would have been the most significant number we've ever seen in both of those categories. Plus, the House was supporting 80 million for so-called super bridges or major bridges. So this would have been dramatic progress. And then finally, there was the issue of the local road wetland mitigation program, which you're all familiar with. We've gone back and forth over the last decade, you know, trying to make sure that was funded at a proper level. Our organization did a lot of work with Bowser over the last 3 years, and they had agreed to fix the structural budget issue and put it right in their budget so that we could deal square for square on this project. And the stated amount of money that was needed was 14 million in bonds and 6 million in cash. In the end, of course, it was put in the environmental bill really as a holding action at $1.5 million, but talking to Bach and Hansen, the chair over there, and Ingebrigtsen, the chair in the Senate, they all said it was going to get done. But in order to have it get done, you had to have a bonding bill. And of course, in the end, not only did we not have a vote on the bonding bill, we never actually saw a bonding bill. Of course, anybody who's followed the legislature for more than 3 or 4 years knows that any good bonding chair has got a bonding bill for you in 10 minutes if you want one at whatever number you want them to hit, right? And that kind of work was going on, but it didn't happen. So it's really sad, actually. It's the best word I can pick. But we didn't get it. You know, it just didn't happen. They just didn't bring it up for a vote. So in both cases, so that's where it sits. I'd be happy to answer any questions. One last thing I want to say though is Ryan Thilgis, your county engineer. You know, we meet every month with the county engineers, and he's been a lot of fun to work with. He's I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but he's very knowledgeable, very helpful to the organization, and is a very smart guy, and we're glad we can work with him. So
it's good to hear. Yeah, it's true.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
It's really disappointing that the things didn't go through, but you know, we keep on the good fight, and we've been doing this. I know Steve and I have been doing this for years and years, and you can't let yourself down, because next year we might break through, and that's what we're hoping for.
Okay, ready. Thanks, Steve, and we're ready for Nancy.
Nancy.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Nancy Selesky, and I do Public Health and Human Services for Micah, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Is this on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Although there was no budget bill that they came to an agreement on, with moments to spare on that very last night, that Sunday night, they did pass, excuse me, a $93 million mental health bill, which was a standalone bill that the Senate had started, and in the end, the House agreed to go along with that. It did include a number of county priorities, including the increased funding for adult mental health initiatives, and this was in response to DHS proposed reform, which would have taken existing funding, AMHI funding, and spread it out to more initiatives. We were successful in lobbying for an additional $20 million in the system, and so that was a win. There's also a direction to DHS that they ensure that no existing AMHI receives less than the amount that the region received in fiscal year 22. So those existing initiatives were held harmless. And finally, they eliminated the pilot language in statute. A number of key legislators from this area of the state were very much involved in this, including Senators Julie Rosen, Rich Draheim, Senator Nick France, and also Representative Luke Frederick. So this became clearly a priority, that we didn't want to lose money in the mental health system. They also addressed competency restoration, which was another priority for counties. The deal that was struck creates a state competency restoration board within the judiciary, and then they provided funding for forensic navigator services for individuals that are not competent to stand trial. And this was a win for us because there were proposals at one time that counties would have been responsible for delivering those navigator services, and so under what they came to an agreement with, the state is paying for that. It's about $11 million a year to the state board, and then another $5 million to the district courts for the examination costs. Other investments that I would mention that are included in that mental health bill, they increased the mobile crisis base by $4 million a year. They removed the county cost share for the Yellow Line project that we passed several years ago. They addressed children's mental health by creating and funding Children's Residential Facility Crisis Stabilization Services, and DHS is also directed to seek federal approval for that. Finally, they put in $1 million into mental health urgency rooms, $2 million into shelter-linked mental health grants, and another $2 million into school-linked behavioral health grants. And the governor did hold a ceremonial signing on this bill last week, so that is current law at this point. Another standalone bill that passed related to the opioid settlement, and Governor Walz again had a ceremonial signing last week on this. The bill creates a framework for distributing the nearly $300 million that Minnesota will receive as part of the settlement with the opioid distributors and manufacturers. As you know, counties have a direct appropriation of 75% of those dollars, which is $222 million approximately. The other 25% will be distributed through grants by DHS for opioid education and prevention programs. The legislation does require municipalities that receive these direct appropriations to report annually as to how those dollars are being used. Looking ahead, there was one bill that we want to mention, a very unusual bipartisan bicameral bill that addressed ALS. There's funding of $20 million for research and $5 million for caretakers for those folks that are taking care of these individuals. And this was in response to Senator David Tomassoni, who was afflicted with this disease about a year ago, and so he made it his priority, and the legislature saw fit to make sure that that was passed. When it became clear that there wasn't going to be a budget bill, the conference committee did put together a policy-only bill, and that again also passed on that last Sunday night. I'll just mention a few of the highlights. They expanded the scope of mental health data that can be shared with law enforcement agencies when responding to an individual that's having a mental health crisis. They established the opioid substance use and addiction sub-cabinet within the executive branch. They increased eligibility for SNAP program, the food assistance program, from 165% to 200% of federal poverty guidelines. Counties are required under this legislation to verify federal work requirements for those folks that are on the SNAP program. They also extended the amount of time that a homeless person or family can stay in transitional housing from 24 months to 36 months. And for people applying for economic assistance, counties are now allowed to complete the household reporting forms with the individual by either phone or in writing. It used to be that if there was an incomplete form, that form had to be sent back to the individual, and now county workers are able to get that correct information by phone or in writing. So what didn't happen, with the exception of the mental health bill that we mentioned, pretty much anything that cost any money, there were fundamental differences going into the conference committee with regard to the $1 billion that they were allocated to spend on health and human services. The Senate wanted to spend the bulk of it on long-term workforce issues. They wanted rate increases for individuals working in nursing care facilities, PCAs. You're all hearing about the shortage of workers there. So they were focused on that. Also, employment services and increases to non-emergency medical transportation rates. The House, in addition to supporting those long-term care investments, wanted to invest additional money in child care, dollars for the homeless, Over $100 million was proposed in the House bill for public health that would have included family home visiting and emergency preparedness. And the House also had a proposal that would have increased general assistance for single adults. Looking ahead a little bit here, the Child Protection Legislative Task Force is starting up again. This is a group, I think, that you recall in 2015 there was a child that was killed at the hands of one of his parents, and the legislature responded by creating this legislative task force in 2015. In their report, they came up with 93 recommendations, and I know that some of these recommendations are very difficult for counties. There's just so many things that changed at that time. The task force again is starting up. It's chaired by Representative Dave Pinto from St. Paul and Senator Mark Johnson from Grand Forks, East Grand Forks. They are looking at having monthly meetings. They've had one meeting thus far, and they've indicated that they're going to be looking at those 93 recommendations to see what might be able to be changed within that system. So that is happening. Finally, I also want to call out your staff. Both Angie Youngerberg and Phil Clausen are just a phone call away, and in fact, they were this morning on something that I needed. And just know that, again, you know that they represent not only your county very well, but counties as a whole.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Nancy.
Thank
and
you.
The good words. Those last words, obviously, not a whole lot. I guess I've never seen anything like this, Steve, happen like this at the end. But I don't know if it's a lot of the retirements, and especially some of the key players that, I don't know, didn't want to push it. I don't know. It's a little different.
Well, let me talk about, let me add to your disappointment, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Not disappointing us yet.
Just a couple of others, and I'll be briefer on this, and then we're all still happy to stand for any questions. But corrections and public safety, I do want to highlight because it's an area that was also a really key priority for counties. In the what did pass there, Nancy covered competency restoration and opioid. There's also a data sharing authority that a policy language that counties had been collaborating on and working with the legislature to get passed for a number of years, and along with cities and others. And so there's some broader authority from a data practices standpoint for co-responder teams and the like to share mental health crisis data while still keeping it private in order to do the work and hopefully respond in different ways to some 911 calls in emergency and crisis situations that might arise. So that's really good news. But again, what did not pass, one of the most significant, as I know you all know, underfunded or unfunded mandates that counties administer as part of the partnership with the state is probation services and community corrections. The counties, all 87 of them had worked, and across all three systems of probation services had worked with some really top-notch outside advisors and policymakers over the last year to bring together proposals for both to significant increased funding as well as a new fairer, more equitable allocation across the state for community corrections and probation services funding. Both the House and the Senate had significant increases. Senate had $25 million of increased funding each year in their bill for these purposes, but no formula changes. House had a smaller amount in the first year, but eventually amping up to $38 million a year, plus the formula changes that the counties had recommended in their bill. In the end of the day, nothing happened on public safety at all, and so that those changes and increased funding to community corrections and probation services did not happen. By our estimates, that could have been anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 a year for Blue Earth County every year for these services. So we're hoping that that work gets picked up in a future legislative session, if not here in a special session. The reality is that that wasn't the most significant issue or dividing the House and the Senate in the public safety conversation. There was also smaller amounts of money for emergency service, emergency management planning grants. The House had a little bit of money in for armored radio funding, and there was some money for crossover youth grant funding. Just one other, flipping to general government, really just another area where nothing happened. There was an environmental bill that was poised. I shouldn't say poised. There was a tentative agreement with a very small target that was achieved on the last day of session, but the bill wasn't passed. We worked with partners starting really early on to get increased SCORE funding for counties. There would have been overall about a 15 or 20% increase each year in funding for county SCORE grants had the tax bill and the environment tentative agreement passed. There was about a $3 million a year in increased SCORE funding in the tax bill and an additional $700,000 in the environment bill for that purpose. As well as environment, some additional money for closed landfills, at least in the metro area. We're still working on the statewide program. And as Steve mentioned, the King report, Deputy Registrar fee changes was under discussion, as well as cybersecurity grants. I'm just going to recap then. In the end of the day, flipping to this next slide, $7 billion in fiscal 23 is left on the bottom line in addition to budget reserves unallocated. So that is roughly 13 to 14% equivalent of a 2-year budget. It would be more than that of a 26% of a single-year budget will basically remain there, not being used for tax relief, not being used for infrastructure, not being used for human services or education or public safety or any other public needs. So that is where things stand as of our report today, and we'll keep a small amount of hope for a special session, and that certainly is something we as an association have encouraged. We sent a letter to the governor and legislative leaders very early on in June urging that to happen, and this is where we are. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, is there any questions with Matt or the other two?
Good report.
It was a very good report. I didn't mean to jump from. Still can't understand though. Yeah, I mean, I know what happened, how it happened. You explained it all. And, whatever. We'll see.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, you commented on this last slide. You can see, whether or not it helped or hurt. Normally, a lot of retirements we think of historically, traditionally, as being something that helps the situation because, members wanting to sort of finish up work that they maybe have dedicated their entire legislative careers to, that they just want to get done as part of that that retirement effort. That didn't seem to help us get there, but as you can see, between 30 and 40% of the legislature in both chambers will be new to their chamber, even without voters weighing in, just due to retirements. So a significant number of new membership next year.
And that's part of it. Or it didn't happen, I guess.
And the partisanship seems to be pulling apart rather than going together, which is sad. I mean, what we need is people that are willing to cross that line and shake hands and say, okay, how do we get this done? And that's what's sad with state and federal politics right now, is that county boards are used to coming out and saying, okay, how do we get this taken care of, and take care of our disagreements and take, and get it done. Of course, it helps. We're all nonpartisan, but it didn't used to be there. Steve, you remember that. Mark remembers that.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't used to be like that, and we need to get more people that really care about people and care about the partisanship that they're in. But thank you very much for this report. More work to do. We haven't stopped yet. We're not going to give up, and you know, we need it to help our county and our citizenship and then across the state of Minnesota. But thank you.
All right. Any other comments? I appreciate you coming and appreciate you. We'll catch you a little bit after.
Thank you much.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys. Yeah, thank you. We won't be long here. I guess all we have is committee reports.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, Kip, you want to start?
Sure. After our last board meeting, I was at the AMC district meeting, and you got elected vice chair again. I don't know if anybody filled you in on that yet, Mark, but you weren't there, so you are still the vice chair, and Blair is the chair. Then I had some discussion on JD 33, which we seen this morning. We had a good landowner meeting, talked about the same thing we seen today. Nice to see that moving forward. Had a busy work session, which we covered a lot of different things that we had to deal with. We had our SECB chair board meeting. We got our regular meeting this week, so once a week right before the meeting we all get together and figure out what we're going to have on the agenda. And then we had extension. I got our reports from the extension committee. Things are going really well there. We did a preliminary budget approval from the support from the organization there, and Josh is doing a great job filling in up there with keeping the communication going between that and admin. And then we had a JD 49 update, which we got tomorrow, Mark, over in Faribault County, so a lot of things going on with that. Had my South Central Workforce meeting yesterday, got the reports from all the staff there. Same news as everyone else, it's hard to find help and trying to do what they can to get more people in the system. And then MVAC personnel meeting last night, not a whole lot to report there. Everything's going pretty well. Bought a couple more Toyota Corollas to lease out to some people in that organization. And then this morning I had my statewide emergency communication legislative meeting to discuss some items that had to be done before the board meeting on Thursday. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kip. You got done in time to get here, so
yeah, just in time.
Yes.
Good report. Again, just like Kip, we had our District 7 meeting in LeSueur County. That went very well. Of course, I couldn't give the report like our chair could have, but it went okay.
It went okay?
Yeah.
You survived. Okay.
That evening, we did a Rapidan Dam focus group in Lake Crystal. I think Ryan Till just did a really good job, and we had a lot of questions, a lot of answers, and I think it went very well. The next day, on the 9th, I had a library board meeting, and then on the 13th, I had a TDS ACHF meeting, virtual meeting, where we approved some funding for projects across the area. We had our, on the 14th, we had our county board work session. And then on the 15th, let's see, I had a NACO USDOT meeting. That afternoon, myself and Mark interviewed Julianne Woersma. And later on that evening, I had a community farm grill up that we had out at the community farm, and I'd invite everybody to really go out there. I think not exactly sure the days. I think Tuesdays and Thursdays she's out there, but does a really good job, and the community farm is looking good this year. They got some good stuff growing out there. On Thursday the 16th, I had my TDS meeting, and that's the end of my report.
All right, thank you, Vance. Okay, mine is a little short here. After, let's see, on the 8th, I did catch I couldn't make, like I said, our AMC thing, but I did make the MICA meeting virtually. I did catch most of that. And that's when we started trickling in the news. Yeah. But it wasn't quite to that point yet, like what their great report they gave, Mikey gave us today. Then, with Lake Vance, I went to the meeting with on the Rapidan Dam in Lake Crystal, and it was pretty good. It would be probably where we'd find more people a little bit more nervous about maybe messing with doing anything with the dam, but it was a good hearing. And then I had on that Saturday 11th the new patio at the library.
Oh, I forgot about the patio.
Well, I remember because they did have the brass band there.
Talked about that.
That was great.
Yeah.
And then they did have Partners for Housing meeting on the 15th. And that pretty much concludes mine. And that will do.
Okay.
All right. Okay. With that, we just have to have a motion to recess. We have our lunch.
I'll move to recess.
I'll second.
It's moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, carries. Meeting recessed, and we're going to the Swiss and Madison.
All right.
It goes a little faster with 3 than 5.